Chapter 28. The automatic door is flown open faster than it's programmed to, as the colonel enters the room. All the techs turn their heads and shield themselves from his vision. He scans the desks until he finds the one he's looking for, Ashton Graves. He's unaware of the trouble looming over him literally. Once his webcam turns on, he sees the reflection and rightfully panics. The colonel waits for the man to finish before speaking a single sentence. "Oh, pack your bags, kid. You're going to visit a friend." The techs silently watch the colonel walk out the door before the murmurs begin. It was understood that this mission might come with the possibility that everyone would be on the planet at some point. For Ashton, that time had already come. That night in the village was the happiest I'd ever been. Yuchevik and Gwanik accompany us around the fire while the villagers dance and thank us. I was one of the only adults that stayed away from the orangutan juice. Towards the end of the night, I showed the warriors how to shoot the rifle. They went from being frightened to wanting a turn. They may be a slow-advancing society, but they adapt to almost anything quite quickly. I woke up as one of the lucky few without a hangover. Gwanik and I went on a walk to the south. We stopped at a bunch of trees, smelled the wind, and found a few carcasses of smaller animals. I followed Gwanik as he led us west and back north toward the village. He picked up a scent just around the tree line and turned right back around. His pace quickened. I had to run just to keep up. Gwanik is sitting next to a big tree looking back at me. He's found what he was searching for. I take a few minutes to walk slowly in his direction. I pet him, and to my left spot a Bishnuk lying in a pool of blood. It was about as big as Gwanik in size. Most likely one of the cubs wanted a piece of the soldier before he got to me. I turned back to leave when Gwanik's ears perked up. The trees behind me crash apart as the ground shakes. Gwanik takes off to the village, leaving me alone. I turn around expecting to see another Bishnuk, but nothing is there. I see smoke in the distant trees and a small glint of metal. My heart sinks. I was about to turn back when I heard screaming. A soldier of Starfleet 89 would not be screaming after impact. I had to hold back my laughter a bit. Whoever this poor soul was, they have my condolences for the worst planetary entry I've ever seen. The latch is still sealed when I get to it. Poor guy only had 30 seconds of oxygen left. He would have died in an escape pod if it wasn't for me. Must have passed out again after not being able to pull the latch. I dragged his lifeless body to the chief and shaman. They must have thought he was dead at first, as I had to tell the warriors not to take him away. His name tag on his vest told me everything I needed to know about him. Ashton is their second best programmer. After I was done in the escape pod program, he took it over. Not a survival instinct in his body, but he could prove to be useful in a number of ways, especially if the colonel wants me dead. The chief speaks to me directly after I explain the situation. Ashton is free to take my old house, so long as he receives the same training from the shaman. If he does anything rash, I take the blame and deal with him accordingly. When the chief was finished speaking, the warriors picked up his body and carried him out. The shaman offers me a cup of tea as the chief stares at me. Something was off. The tea kettle was nowhere in sight. Chapter 29. I waited for Ashton to wake up in my old house, lit a small fire for lighting, and asked Yuchevik to make a meal for him. Reminded me of myself before going to Alaska. Looking around, I noticed the galactic translator lying on the ground. I see the confusion on his face as he wakes up. He recognizes me, at least, but frantic while speaking. "Last thing I knew, I was asleep in bed, and then I woke up in the escape pod, and I couldn't get out, and I thought I was a goner, but you..." He takes a second to breathe finally. "You're Blaine Morrison, right?" I stay silent. "Dude, everyone on the mothership is talking about you. We thought you were dead." He stops talking as I watch his expression change. "But you're clearly not, I guess." His hand covers his mouth for a moment. I could see the amount of questions churning in his mind. I sigh. "Take a walk with me, why don't you?" I say, turning around to open the door. Ashton hesitates a moment before following. A minute later, we're in the village. The women and children were much less scared of him than they were of me. The warriors were the first to introduce themselves, comparing our skin colors. I shove the warrior with the smart mouth as Gwanik runs past with a gust of wind. Looking back at Ashton, his eyes are wide and pupils dilated. I chuckle at him as we make our way to the chief's hut. The teapot is on the fire while the shaman greets us. I hand him the translator and sit with them, instructing Ashton to do the same. I watch him follow my lead and cough on his first sip. The shaman speaks to Ashton directly while I listen. The chief does much the same. It was nearly comical to me how frightened he was at everything. After the shaman was done speaking, I took Ashton to meet Yuchevik. He liked my house from the outside, but when he saw why it was so big, he nearly fainted. I helped him into the kitchen chair and asked Yuchevik for some water. Gwanik shoves the door open and barges into the kitchen, knocking Yuchevik into the counter, spilling the drink. "Big butt monster beast, no!" Yuchevik yells to Gwanik. I laugh as his tail wags. By the time I got Ashton back to my old house, I think he was ready to sleep again. I knew he was a night owl by nature, and getting up early was going to be a challenge. I decided to train Gwanik to wake him in the mornings. We talked for a bit about the Colonel, working on programming, and how strange this planet really was. Ashton was every bit of a genius that I'd hoped. He really was going to be the deciding factor in this game of cat and mouse that I'm in. I got serious with him toward the end of our conversation. The gunman who tried to kill me was also a blessing in disguise. With Ashton's help, we could make guns. We could weaponize the frequency generator better. We could have a fighting chance. Ashton shakes his head in understanding. We were both as good as dead. For now, we would have to plan while the eye in the sky is down and hope for the best. Gwanik makes things easier, but not by much. Chapter 30. It didn't take long for Ashton to get settled into a routine. Every morning I'd let Gwanik out, and he would burst into my old house. I usually walk into him trying to shove his tongue down Ashton's throat. I'd have breakfast with Yuchevik, and then we would talk for a while walking around. Some days she would be busy with the women, other days I would hunt. Ashton finally got back to me with the gun blueprint at the end of the week. We decided on making pistols. Hopefully it would decrease our dependence on sulfur and gunpowder. It would be easier to train the warriors as well. I also asked him to take on yet another project for me. There wasn't any time to waste. Ashton came to get me when he was done with the shaman these days. We would code and test together, fixing flaws with pinpoint accuracy. It was as thrilling as it was rewarding. Even convinced him to hunt with us once. He has a long way to go on that front. Yuchevik made dinner for the three of us tonight. As I walk in with Ashton, I catch him laughing at her remark about my height. I guess he was starting to pick up the language as well, even if it was at my expense. The three of us sit in the living room trying not to pass out. Gwanik barges in the door nearly screaming and plops down on Ashton as he struggles to keep upright. Yuchevik laughs at them. I couldn't help but smile. It was around 2 a.m. when Ashton and I had finished one of our projects. The second matter control was now outfitted with 10 lasers instead of just the 2. It was now time to start the pistol operation. I talked with the shaman about our next project beforehand. The warriors helped me track down sulfur, and just like that, we started forming our bullets. It was now Ashton's turn to fan the flame from me. We only made a few shells by the day's end. Our choice of smaller caliber meant the shells would be harder to make. Ashton wasn't discouraged. It was surprising. The warriors and shaman wanted to help the next day. We showed them the process and went to work ourselves. The pile of misshapen metal was enough to begin melting again. However, we did manage to make another 3 shells. I tasked the warriors to make plates for the weapons instead. Ashton and the shaman worked on the shells while I started on gunpowder. I decided to use all the metal balls we made before as projectiles. By the end of the week, we had 2 operational pistols, 20 bullets, and only one person who knew how to use it. Ashton had never fired a weapon, so much as held one. I took everyone to a nearby tree to demonstrate. The entire village went silent after the first shot. For some, it may have been triggering, but for the warriors, they were screaming with joy before anyone had their hearing back. The next few days in the forge were some of the most productive I'd ever seen. Warriors churned out 10 weapons and 12 magazines. Ashton and the shaman had nearly 100 bullets. By the time I'd finished the batch, another was ready. At the end of our days, I began training those willing on pistols. We started with how they worked, how to load them and clean them. Then we began aiming with rounds. I didn't want to, but when I gave them ammunition, the warriors nearly killed a tree. Chapter 31. We had most of the village helping with the guns in some way now. Women helped either load shells or make gunpowder. I worked in the forge half the day, the other teaching and supervising. A few of the warriors took the pistol and could shoot with a few minor adjustments. Others couldn't hit the side of a building if they tried. I spoke to Ashton about making a crossbow that might work better. The shaman stayed with me the entire time we trained. His gun skills were the best by far. They were very curious kids that were turned away very fast. I did the best I could training the warriors. A few could pick up the pistols, the rest learned the crossbow. Since the shaman was a sharpshooter, I decided to make him a rifle. When I take Guanik in the morning, we find a spot to rest, and I take out my pistol. At first the wolf was scared of the shots. Now he just lays down and bites his paws. Guanik was even coming around to the villagers, but mostly the kids. Ashton finally got a break from his mornings with the shaman to code again. I would find him slumped over the desk most days and have to wake him. I watch him adjust his glasses and reach for an energy drink that doesn't exist. There were still a few other projects I had Ashton help me with. We made matter control for my feet. Through many hours of practice, I could eventually levitate slightly. For the warriors, we made body armor, and the shaman got his rifle. We were becoming as prepared as we could be. I come home at the end of the day to Yuchevik with dinner, and Guanik at my feet. The smell of sulfur on my clothes makes her pull away from my kiss. She hands me a glass of water, saying I should pour it on myself. Yuchevik accompanied us on the walk this morning. Guanik sniffs the dirt in the front of the house while I wait for Yuchevik to exit the door. We follow the wolf to the edge of the forest and exchange a glance. Her vision slips past my head. Yuchevik walks past me slowly, brushing the foliage away. I turn around to see Guanik 15 yards away, and the mother Bishnuk peering out of the bush. Yuchevik stretches her arms out towards the being that doesn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind tells me the mother isn't alone. Danger's close. Guanik doesn't seem to notice either. Yuchevik is in front of the bush now. The Bishnuk stared her down without a sound. The mother lifts her head and slowly sniffs. Yuchevik stands there waiting. The Bishnuk's breath moves the leaves in the bush. She touches the creature's chin, and its eyes close. I feel a rumble on the soles of my feet, and Guanik lets out a bark. I watch as Yuchevik sets her head on the creature's. It was a heartwarming reunion. Until Guanik came along. He sits next to me, looking over at Yuchevik, when he spots a Bishnuk. His tail folds under his torso as he cowers behind me. Yuchevik looks back at me and utters a single word, "Mother." The rumbling in my soul stops. The Bishnuk lifts its head into Yuchevik's body, pushing her away. She rests her arms back at her sides and watches the Bishnuk walk away. I let my breath out finally, tell Yuchevik how terrified I was in that moment. We had talked about the Bishnuk before, but she never mentioned the mother. She explained it as we walked. After her village fell ill, she wandered the forest until the mother found her sleeping under a tree. Yuchevik said she would have died from starvation without the mother. She spent years with the creature before settling down in the jungle. Chapter 32. The ship jolts slightly as it releases from its port on the mothership. The colonel's fingertips touch together as he sits stationary at his desk. The windows showcase the bow of the ship and space beyond. Holographic screens indicate the length of travel, speed, and completion of tasks. The room is a sterile white, like the reflection off the bald man's head. It was a change of course, yet a needed one. In the bay of the ship, soldiers stand in formation awaiting instruction. Techs race behind them frantically. A disembodied voice counting down from 0. The ship lands gracefully, pushing into the dirt. The soldiers are the first out of the ship. Fog rolls into the door, and flashlights try to break through it. The men hold their positions while the techs unload supplies. The colonel is the last off the ship, exhaling smoke from his comically large cigarette. They were just a few miles south of Aladron and the trader. The colonel observes the men around him, walking silently. In just a few minutes, the makeshift camp was set up. Soldiers were sent ahead to scout, while the techs gathered intel. It wasn't long until the soldiers came back. The colonel aims his .44 into the weaving leaves, only to see 2 men carrying an injured. The men lay him in the tent as the techs stare in shock. Their only medic began patching and stitching immediately. The colonel brushes off the medic's attempt to get them back on the mothership. The injured man is loaded onto the ship, and only the driver accompanies him. The colonel turns to the rest of his men, who refuse to meet his gaze. The soldiers look on past the trees, his tech staring at blinking screens. Contact the mothership, and have them send 10 reinforcements. We stay until Blaine dies. The colonel walks out of the tent before finishing his sentence. I trained the warriors the best I could. They honed their abilities with each other, mock gunfights while laughing. The village had mostly grown used to the firing of pistols. The shaman was hitting targets 100 yards out. Ashton and I worked on making armor plating. Yuchevik and the woman handled the cloth for us. I could see in her eyes that she would be right beside me when things got bad. She was upset I wouldn't teach her to shoot. Even Gwanik was outfitted with plates. He looked even more menacing than usual, since the soldiers took to painting his cloth. We fed everyone and made improvements where we could. The warriors were beginning to look like modern fighters. We began running scenarios with the shaman on various points from the tree line. Ashton prepared bullets that fired berries to indicate hits. The warriors would occasionally fight over who shot who first. Next, I had Yuchevik, Gwanik, and myself to be the offensive force. The villagers didn't stand a chance. We talked with the shaman about their weak points and how to improve. We ran escape routes with women and children and dug small spaces for them to hide in. Ashton and I made motion sensors and fashioned them around the tree line. If there was another soldier coming, we were ready. Chapter 33. I had barely gotten the armor on Gwanik before he escaped my grasp and leapt out the front door. Yuchevik follows behind me as we make our way northwest toward the jungle. It was time to get more alcohol. I walked behind the two of them, watching their nose lift in synchronicity. Vegetation changes slowly as we enter the jungle. Vines replace bushes and ferns take over the ground among the roots. By the time we reached the lagoon, I dropped to the ground. Yuchevik decided to go for a swim, while Gwanik began marking the area. I watched the leaves blow in the wind and shut my eyes for a moment. It doesn't take long for the exchange to take place. Yuchevik climbs out of the water and gives the orangutan some root from her bag in exchange for the alcohol. She gives me a devious look before putting it in her bag. Yuchevik gathers a bunch of fruit, vegetables, and roots before we leave. I watch her splash Gwanik with some water from her canteen as he yelps. My body aches as I lift it from the ground. It took us twice the time just to get home. Yuchevik and Gwanik had to check nearly every square inch of trees before moving on. It was like living with a pack of dogs. When the slightest sound is heard, their heads whip toward the source. We ended up at the tree line near Ashton's place. He was outside for a change, looking up the clouds of all things. I pat him on the shoulder as he looks down and quickly moves out of Gwanik's way. As we enter the house, I collapse onto the desk chair. Gwanik's panting reverberates off the walls as he rushes over to his water bowl. Yuchevik's mood has changed. She slams her bag on the counter and is muttering something about a sound. Gwanik finds his way to me as I try to lazily pet his face. He paces under my desk, around my legs, whimpering. I sit up in the chair and observe him. No limping, no gashes in the fur. Yuchevik is trying to calm herself still. The faint noise enters my eardrums. The frequency is high-pitched, irritating like a smoke detector. I wake the computer to see a radar on the screen. The line moves across a circular area with a tiny pulse at the very bottom left. Ashton is looking at the clouds as I make my way over. He notices my approach at the last second. "Did you put up that radar on my computer?" I ask him. "What are you talking about, radar? I didn't..." His voice trails off. I watch as the blood rush from his face as he rushes inside. I follow him, begging for an explanation. His monitor illuminates a small space as he opens and closes panels furiously. "There," he says to me. "The mothership sent it directly to your computer and named the file Insurrection Day?" If it were the mothership, it would have been here already. This is just a transport ship. I rush out of Ashton's hut before he can ask his question. The chief lays in his cot as I swing open his door. It smacks against the wall, jolting him awake. The shaman, chief, warriors, and I stand in the clearing just south of the village. Women and children rush out of their homes and into tunnels underground. Yuchevik looks towards me from the dirt before closing the door. I could see a ship on the horizon. It was a transport ship, a new one at that. Even the mothership was at least 50 years old. Now the warriors were picking up the sound of the engine. They shift uncomfortably. The shaman in chief remained calm. I instruct the shaman to look down his scope. He says there are at least 3 people in the front window. The ship is just a minute out from us. Ashton gives us a countdown. 3, 2, and... Ashton points to the sky above the trees. None of us can see anything. None of us move. Only the shaman grips his necklace around his neck and brings one to his lips. Guanik is staring at the same spot in the sky as us. I can feel him growling. His head whips down to the trees in a split second. I watch it slowly return to the sky. A Bishnuk has hurled itself in the air. The silence is filled with screeching of metal. A momentous roar from the father Bishnuk as he clings to the ship now visible to everyone. He's slipping off the back end. His weight caused the craft to tip. There was a circular light emitting from the front of the craft. I watch in horror as the beam shoots across the sky. The Bishnuk falls in slow motion as the ship regains its balance. The front of the ship now swings past level, its beam moving towards the village. Sparks erupt over the homes. Ashton screams from his hut and halfway dances in joy. Sneaky bastard had a few projects of his own. We didn't train to fight off a warship like this. That didn't stop the men around me from waiting for my signal. The only way to win this fight was to down the craft. I asked the shaman to fire at the men in the cabin. His shots bounce off the glass without so much as a scuff mark. The engines are internal. We can't very well tie ropes to it. Our best option might just be to hold off as long as we can. I turn to the shaman who holds his necklace, rubbing his fingers around it. The beak was the first thing I noticed in the sky behind the craft, its wings slightly bigger than the craft on their own. I watch as the being's talons sink into the metal. The bird struggles to lift it. Operators try in desperation to open flaps and windbreakers to dislodge the creature. They manage to snap a toe off the bird, who shrieks in pain. With one large swoop of its wings, the craft is lifted onto the sky and dropped. Time slowed to a near stop. The craft falls as smoke billows from the inside. The warriors stumble as the shockwave from the craft strikes the ground. The ship rests on the trunks of trees just outside the clearing. I hear the father Bishnuk pounding on the glass cockpit. He belts at the men struggling to regain consciousness. The creature circles the craft, clawing at any upturned metal. The warriors and I encircle the craft and give the Bishnuk room. He found the door with a small window and is currently breaking it down. Air hisses as the cabin is breached. The door is forced open as a rage of machine gun fire exits the ship. The Bishnuk hides his face and backs away slightly until they run out of ammunition. Now the enraged animal begins to drag the men individually. The first soldier is sent flying into the tree behind the Bishnuk. His brain coats the bark. A few of the soldiers find other exits. Some try to raise their gun. They are ended quickly. Others throw it toward me, with their hands raised, and sit to the right of us. The Bishnuk bangs against the metal door, stretching its frame. He lets out a final roar before retreating. The gigantic bird is nowhere in sight now. The shaman and chief begin delegating tasks and treating the injured. Guanik had other plans. He digs at the side of the ship. Another compartment opens to the site of Colonel Davis, Maine. Chapter 34. I watch him crawl along the dirt with a gash running blood down his face. The colonel could hardly get to his feet. I watch him let go of the dirt with his right hand and begin to lift off the ground. My boot anchors his left hand to the dirt. He looks up at me while gritting his teeth. I allow him to stand, watching his right hand now behind his back. He draws, his barrel pointed at my eyes, my finger pointed at his torso. I watch the gears in his head turn. The finger on the trigger refuses to move. My left hand raises the colonel in the air, while my right one grabs his stock. I aim my weapon and kill the colonel. The few men that survived were led back to the village and treated for their injuries. They spoke of an outpost where the colonel had abandoned more than a few others. The Bishnuk might have already dealt with them at this point. Yuchevik leads the villagers back to their houses with Guanik in tow. Blood coats his fur in his mouth, yet the children still pet him. I embrace Yuchevik before she promptly checks me over. The chief hobbles over to me and lightly taps me with his cane. It was an appreciation, I'm sure. Ashton and the shaman make their way over with bottles of orangutan juice. It was time for the village to celebrate. The sunset was beginning to turn the horizon into its majestic pink and purple hues. I sit on a log around the fire with Yuchevik and Guanik at my sides. The shaman dances wildly with the warriors as the rest of us sing. I was still in shock at the fact we were still alive, impressed with Ashton for protecting everyone. Amazed at the journey of just these few short months. There was still a nagging feeling in my gut, no matter how much I pushed it away. Ashton and I walked to his hut with Guanik. The wind helps us walk as we go. I sat on his couch to await this holy grail he claims will change everything. He babbles about the back door and the mothership software he installed, and all their little secrets. Ashton hands me a small monitor with the cover of a book on the screen. Robert Swan, Life on Mars. Everything on this planet was designed to be 2.5 times the size of Earth. This may look like aloe vera, but it's only grass. In the regions between the forest and jungle biomes, there are many species of bioluminescent plant life. The planet has a vast and expansive ecosystem with deserts, jungles, dense forests, and oxygen-deprived mountaintops. Any adventure on the planet could be fatal. The savanna biome takes up the area between the forest, desert, mountains, and jungle, with few trees and fewer animals. The lagoon in the jungle is the hotspot for all life, featuring many birds, orangutans, snakes, and reptiles. The planet's ecosystem relies heavily on a mostly predatory environment for the wildlife. Bishnuk are the top of the food chain. However, they have enemies. Husk wolves are their main opponents. Next would be the Choctaw, who utilizes speed and its deadly claws to cut vital organs. The Deuce are more than capable of dealing with them as well. We also developed a few species of canine, including a dingo and fox. My personal favorite is a chinchilla-rabbit hybrid, the softest thing ever, if you can catch it. There are many variations of small rodents and reptiles, birds, fish, and other secrets. The Steron, a stork and herring hybrid, beautifully colored, flesh-eating bird. The Fulf, fox and wolf hybrid, basically a dog. The Choctaw, a chicken and velociraptor hybrid, a deadly species of fast, flightless bird. The Quetzalcoatl, prehistoric pterosaur, the largest flying reptile on Earth. An improved version displays the sharp talons, sporting a wingspan of 70 to 90 feet. The mother Bishnuk is the only albino in the herd. Her mate is the polar opposite, black bear variant. They produce 3 offspring, black, brown, and gray color. The orangutan bat hybrid, the only species of monkey that can fly. The crizzard, crocodile monitor lizard. The nocturnal crizzard spends its days sleeping in the cave, preserving its energy for its hunting in the darkness. The gama, goat-llama hybrid. The gama lives in the forest and mountain ranges in the summer. Although territorial, it spends most of its time in hiding. The deuce, deer, moose hybrid. Venison on Mars is more than a special occasion. Even the does are 9 foot tall. The hippogator, a hippo and alligator hybrid. This animal thrives in the jungle rivers, weighing 2 tons at birth, and is also an apex predator. Elephino, rhino-elephant hybrid, standing at a staggering 20 feet, with sharp husks and a fat nose. Stay clear. Epilogue. Thank you for listening to my book. The idea came from a short story about a man getting his game taken by bears with opposable thumbs. It was originally only 3 pages long. This is my first full-length book and audiobook, and man was it an adventure. I tried to draw the Bishnuk but failed. AI was able to do the job with more instruction in some images. It astounded me how easily I could replicate the image I had in my head. Originally, I had titles for the chapter as a form of foreshadowing, but scrapped it. Surprise isn't much better to write, in my opinion. It's a much better way to write. To those of you who will want a second book, I have many ideas. The second draft never had an endpoint, and there are more creatures to find. A few you can find on the Life on Mars mini-book. If you guys enjoyed this audiobook, I also had pictures going on the entire time. I have finished the first draft of the second book. It's more of a second part to this book. And if you guys want to check out the TikTok page, it is at Mr. Bishnuk. I will see you guys there. Thanks for listening.